Hey folks, welcome back to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm your host, Ian Fisher, and we're picking up with our second segment today. That's a hard thing to say, actually, to talk a little bit about the college list. And if you're watching our video here on social media, you can see that I've got Julia Jones here joining us. For those of you listeners, Julia, you want to say hi to everyone?
Hey everyone, it's great to see you
So
or
it's great to
talk to
have
you.
Julia back. Julia is the head of our list team. She works with so many of our students on developing a college list every single year and helping them to understand how they can start, how they can engage in research, just some of the different ideas that they should look at as they're beginning to identify the best colleges for them. Now, Julia, I've had so many conversations just in the last couple of weeks about beginning the search for the college list, which I guess means that it's the season for this kind of conversation to be happening. So, why is now a good time for juniors to start thinking in specific terms about some of the colleges that might be a fit for them?
Right. Well, yeah, it is. It is definitely the season, and I think part of it is, it's a time of year where it's we're starting to get into spring. I think in a normal year, families might be looking at spring break and trying to think about planning trips to visit colleges. That may not be happening necessarily this year, but I do still think that it's timing wise for students who are maybe applying to colleges in for some of them maybe in early fall even, now is the time to start building that list so that you can start to research and put it together so that when you get into the summer, you've got a working plan, you've got some schools that you're working on so you can start to work on those applications. Yeah.
Now, so many of the conversations I've had just over the last couple of weeks have begun with, we don't know where to start. What do we even do? And I always tell families that's perfectly fine that you don't have a position to start with. It's not your responsibility to be an expert on colleges. That's where we can help you. And it's really strange because you have to have just a huge amount of information and knowledge to be able to make this kind of decision, but you only need that information over the period of about a year when you are selecting colleges to apply to and submitting those applications. And then all of that knowledge becomes unimportant unless you want to join us as admissions professionals. So what should people do to better understand what the college list is all about, or to look for a good option for them? What's a starting point for families?
Well, I think it's kind of like any big purchase that you're making. And I often tell this to parents sometimes, understand this maybe more than students do, but think about if you're buying a house or you're buying a car, right? You don't always know until you get out there and test and try a few, tour a few different, go to a few open houses and see what, do you want a ranch? Do you want a duplex? Do you want, what are you looking for? What, test drive a couple of cars. You don't really know what you're kind of after. You might have a few ideas, but you have to get in there and do it. So I usually say start locally. Anywhere you live, there's likely going to be a college or two, and that might be, those are schools that you've heard of. They're on your radar screen. And again, if you can safely and in other years, I would say, get on a couple of campuses, take a tour.
Sure.
You can do that anytime. This year, you can't necessarily do that right now, but you can still go onto their website and sign up for a virtual tour, sign up for an info session, or whatever live events they may be having virtually, and just take notes and start to listen to what they're talking about, what resonates with you as you're hearing them talk about academic life, about extracurriculars. What are those what listen to what other people, even seniors or students who maybe have been doing this for a while, what are they asking? What
Right.
sometimes you don't even know what to ask, so you can piggyback on what other people are asking to say, oh yeah, I'd love to know more about internships or study abroad, things like that. So it does help to do that, even if you're not don't really know where to start. That's often a good place to go.
That's a great point. I actually like when people used to go on tours, it could be great to just sit in the back of the room and listen to what the conversations were that were happening in front of you. What are the other students asking? Maybe that cues you to learn more about a particular aspect of a particular college, or just in general, that aspect across multiple colleges. So that's a great reminder that students could take advantage of these virtual college tours and hear what other students are asking.
Yeah.
I love the realtor perspective. I use that all the time. Sometimes students are just looking at me like I don't know what I'm talking about, but their parents are behind. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. That's how we went through that home search. So that makes a lot of sense. I've also been encouraging students this year, because things are so remote, because visiting campuses is really hard to do, and a lot of families don't want to do it, and rightly so. I'll have them buy a college guidebook and randomly randomly. I think it's okay to do it randomly. Just choose 10 colleges and read the entry for those colleges and highlight the things that they like and highlight the things that they don't like. And so what you're learning here is across all of these different institutions, what are the attributes that I feel really positively about? And what are the ones that I don't feel positively about? And then I can use that information to then have a more directed search in a particular region
Yes.
that I might consider.
Yeah, you're trying to build your list of must-haves, right? What are the
Right.
things that you really want, that you really know any college is going to have? What are the nice to haves? The things that, yeah, it may not be a deal breaker, but what might separate out, a great school option versus one that's maybe just meh. So, and that's going to be different. That's going to be a different list of things for every student. Even siblings are going to have different, different must-haves and nice to
Yeah.
haves, and that's okay too. So, yeah, but you have to start somewhere. And I love that idea of picking up, going randomly. It doesn't really matter. These initial visits are just to start to set the scene and, figure and learn the lingo and understand what's important to you and what's not.
Yeah.
And, for some students, if they're juniors and they're just doing that, they're starting, that's okay. I often encourage, if I get this question, and sometimes I do from ninth graders or 10th graders, I will encourage, don't get on a plane and travel across the country to visit a campus. But again, look in your backyard, do a local visit, or in the case of this year where you may not necessarily feel safe to travel or to go anywhere in person, open that guidebook and start that process. It's not too early, even as a sophomore or even a freshman, if you want to just start the wheels turning.
That's right. That's right. I remember my realtor when we were buying a home, he's like, hop in the car. We're just going to drive around. I'm going to show you a townhouse. And I don't really think I want a town. He's like, I just want you to see what it looks like. Here's a possibility. And I started learning about siding and I learned about like different aspects of the neighborhoods. I was, okay, I've got an idea now of kind of what I'm looking for. So that's a stage that you can be in for, I think, another month or two, still investigating what the options are before you really have to make the rubber hit the road and start looking for specific schools that might be a fit for you.
Yeah.
Julia, what do you think are the attributes as we get a little bit more specific for a given student that tend to be important that maybe students are underemphasizing? And what are attributes that you think students tend to overemphasize sometimes in the college search?
Sure. Well, I think that, the attributes are, it kind of depends on what you are what you want. If you know what you want to study, some students do, some students don't. And that's okay if you don't. And I think that sometimes is what I think makes students nervous. They're like, I don't know what I want to study. How am I going to start visiting a
Totally.
college?
Yeah.
But thinking about, okay, what academic environment do you want? You don't have to know that if you want to study business or English or engineering, but you do have to, you probably have a sense of what kind of a school environment where do you learn best?
Yeah.
Even this year with virtual learning, I think sometimes that can be, that has sort of shown the light even more on, hey, I really need to be in person and have discussions and be in a small group. Or you may be a student who's found, yeah, virtual learning, I work really well independently and that works for me. And so that might translate to, do you want a school where you might have big lecture classes and big community, or you might really want a smaller school. So I think it's thinking about the style of teaching and academics that's really important, even if you don't necessarily know what you want to major in. And then the culture and atmosphere of a campus, things that you enjoy doing right now. How do you see yourself engaging outside of the classroom on a college campus? And does that college have what you're looking for? Do you want a really big sports school? Do you want a real artsy, a school that has a real great music scene or some sort of feel? So there are a lot of different elements there that you should be focusing on. When you ask like what do students spend a lot of time worrying about that they maybe shouldn't? I think the one thing I always hear is I want to go to the most prestigious school or the school with the
Yeah.
highest ranking. And I think that does have a place. Obviously you're looking to, it's a big investment. And so you want to be in a place that does have that recognition. But I think that students often don't realize how that's not as important as I think we think it is. And that's part of the society we're in. But I think it's really about fit. It's, fit is a word I use 100 times a day sometimes, because I think it is really about, you can go to the most prestigious university in the world, but if it's not a good fit for you academically, socially, it's not going to be right, and you're not going to likely stay there or be successful, even if you do get in.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think that probably the most underestimated determining factor in whether you're successful in college is the student themselves, because you bring the energy, you bring the effort, you're the one that's learning. And so the context in which you are learning, I think, is part of the conversation, but it's not as though everybody who gets into an elite school is just sort of put into a machine that passes them along an assembly line and they come out being ready to be successful, right? You still are an important factor. And if you take those attributes that you have to any school, you can be really successful. And there might be some that you're more successful than others. With respect to, if we were talking about home buying, right? Price, affordability would be a big part of our conversation. And I think when we think about choosing a college, there are two analogies to the price of a home. One is the price of attending college, which we can talk about with our finance colleagues. But I think the other is selectivity and admissibility and how my profile will stack up against a particular school. If I'm a straight B student, I probably shouldn't be spending my time looking at Harvard and Yale and figuring out which of those two I like better, right? So how do students start to think about calibrating their profile relative to the admissibility factors at certain schools?
Right. Yeah, it's a great point, because it is true. You have to, you can apply it, you can't always get exactly that. It's not an exact science, as we know. But yeah, you want to be applying to schools where you are, you have different levels of selectivity, but that you do have some chances there too. And I think there are places where you can glean that information. It's your high school and your high school's counselor, and might be a really good place to start. You're going to be looked at in your high school group as well. So most high schools do track that data of who gets in and who and what their stats were. So you can kind of look and see how that works. Some schools have a web-based program called Naviance that really does show, based on different graphs, who got in and what their GPA and their test scores were from your high school for different colleges. Other websites sometimes will report, what's the average accepted student profile. And this is where you have to be a little honest with yourself of like, okay, how do I stack up here? Looking at academics, knowing that GPA doesn't tell the whole story, but at least it gives you a starting point. Testing, while may or may not necessarily be a factor, some years and some schools are testing optional, and some years it's more of a factor than others. And for some schools, it's more of a factor than others, but it's a good metric to at least see, how your test scores compare. So, so I
would
think
agree.
that those are ways to at least start. And then admissions themselves. I've never been to an admissions talk where they didn't talk about what's the typical accepted student profile. What does that look like?
That's right. That's right. You have to be a little bit careful with the admissions offices, because I think they'll always say like,
right,
everybody has a chance, for whatever reason. It's not always true that everybody has a chance at every institution. It just isn't. And I think that one of the reasons that you and I focus so much on the conversation about how competitive a student can be at particular schools is because we really want to manage expectations as we move our way through the fall. That right now, you and I are not just helping juniors to identify their new colleges, but we are also preparing to hear from our seniors who are receiving decisions from the schools where they chose to apply last fall. And so you can put yourself in a really strong position to get more good news than bad, just based on where you choose to apply to college. That's something that you have a huge amount of control over when you're building your college list. And so students can have a great outcome for this process just by virtue of choosing the right set of schools for them that match them. And students can have a really poor outcome if they don't really think about the best fit colleges for them from a variety of different perspectives. And that's why I think you and I harp on this so much is, when it comes to the outcomes, we want to make sure that you feel like you were successful with respect to applying to college.
Right.
I just sort of catapulted us forward in terms of thinking about the end. Can you help us to understand sort of important points in the timeline? We're in February right now. What's our goal? How many colleges are we sort of looking for? And what are we building towards over the next few months?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So I think right now, again, it's starting with just looking at different types of schools too. And I think that's a really good way to visit, to contrast and compare. And then, hopefully maybe by the spring, having perhaps a bigger group of schools that maybe you've compiled from your school data, your school counselor, your own research to say, okay, here are some schools in different categories that might reflect my chances for admission.
Mhm.
And then that's a good working list. And then you can just, over the course of the spring and summer, really start to narrow it down based on all the different ways that you can find out about a school. Ideally, by the end of the summer, that's usually my benchmark goal for students to say, this is when you really need to have the final list of colleges so that you know not just where you're applying, but when and how and all of that.
That's right.
Um,
That's
yeah.
right.
So, yeah.
Deadlines, application requirements, additional supplements, all of those things are details that you're not going to bring into your research process because they're not relevant to the research, but they are relevant when it comes time to apply. And you've got to give yourself enough lead time to be able to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
All right, Julia, we have now reached the end of the timeline for this segment.
I know.
But I want to thank you for coming on and always being our list guru and helping us to understand how this research process should work.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, when we come back, we're going to fast forward to those seniors and think a little bit about how they can compare different college finance offers. So if you're a parent of a senior, or you might be one day, you'll want to hear it. Don't go away.